Welcome to Hunt, Harvest, Health, the podcast with your host, Ryan Lampers, aka the StHealthy Hunter.
Howdy.
And myself, Dr. Hillary Lampers, where we share our love for ancestral living and the health topics of the modern age. Ryan is the well-rounded bearded brawn of Hunt, Harvest, Health. His knowledge of backcountry adventure, western hunting, and our household status as garden guru and super dad really defines our gut stealthy lifestyle.
Doc Hillary is definitely the brains and beauty behind all of this. She kind of makes everything happen, as I have zero technical skills. Hill is just a wealth of knowledge in all things medicine and nutrition, which not only keep our family healthy, but they help me stay strong in all my mountain adventures.
You can follow us at huntharvesthealth.com, Instagram, and Facebook for more podcasts, recipes, and stories.
All right, let's do this. Boom.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Hunt Harvest Health podcast. This is Doc Hillary, and I'm accompanied here by my awesome husband Ryan. And I'm saying that because we just had Valentine's Day, and I just have to let him know how awesome he is all the time, right, babe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So today, if you haven't already, go back and listen to the podcast before this one, and we talk about Train to Hunt. And we talked with Kenton Clairmont, who is the creator of Train to Hunt, and that last podcast is really all about our story with Train to Hunt and basically the ins and outs of it and everything else. That original podcast was about another hour and 15 minutes longer.
Well, here's the thing. Kenton, I've known Kenton for a while, and if you get Kenton talking,
Yeah.
man, that guy can go. He's a really, really good storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So we got rolling on that podcast, just talking
Mhm.
Train to Hunt. Somehow we spun into hunts that we've
Mhm.
done. And Kenton, he was fresh off of a sheep hunt this fall. And, he had every detail fresh in his mind, and it was pretty awesome. He goes, in this podcast, he goes step by step, the whole thing. So for me, who's, hopes to someday go chase down a sheep eventually, maybe, it was good to hear all the little trials that he had going into it and everything that it took to get that sheep. So
Yeah, when you edit these stories, what I like to do is listen to them first. So I just listen to the interview, all the way through, because then you get an idea of what you want, what you don't want. Like literally this story with the Train to Hunt, there's no editing. I just pulled this sheep story out that you're going to hear today, and he just lays it down for you. And so I usually listen, like if I'm at the gym or I'm in the car, that's kind of my first edit. I'll be listening in pieces. And I don't sheep hunt. I've never been sheep hunting, obviously. I don't know if I'd ever want to go sheep hunting, because after listening to this story, it sounded like the most absolutely miserable thing ever in Alaska with the weather.
It means it was awesome.
And I told Ryan, I said, man, that is a good story. And it obviously has to do with, him and his brother do it together. It's a really profound kind of family story.
And speaking of Alaska, I have a good friend in Abe Henderson who, he's been putting together this really cool guide. I figured I'd talk about it because I think it'll help a lot of people who maybe have thought about doing a do-it-yourself hunt for Sitka blacktail. That is on my bucket list as well. And so Abe has spent a pile of time just getting all this information together. He guides up there, and what he did was he put everything together in like a step-by-step guide that kind of walks you through every single aspect of what it takes to go to Kodiak to hunt Sitka blacktail.
And do it yourself.
And do it yourself. Yeah. So, even if you've never hunted out of state before, it's just holding your hand, walking you right through the process, and every kind of information that you need, including, air charter services, recommendations for lodging. It kind of goes through all the advice that he has for where to hunt, when to hunt, all the gear that you're going to need for that trip. It's just got a whole bunch of tips on everything from avoiding bears to saving money, increasing your odds of success, and pretty much everything. So I've gone through the guide, and I think it's pretty valuable for someone if they're a little intimidated before they head up there and get on to Kodiak and start chasing Sitkas. So it's a great guide. He's going to have it, what is it on? I think it's on huntalaskadiy.com.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go there and sign up for that. He's, it's just something that's going to, I don't know what he's charging, but if you do get on there and you want 20% off, you could punch in HHH20 and get 20% off. So, follow him on Instagram. It's at Alaska_DIY or Facebook. I think it's at Alaska DIY, or check him out on huntalaskadiy.com. So, Kenton, I know you had a great year.
I had a very short season.
But I think you were telling me you haven't hunted for months.
I haven't had a weapon in my hand since August 20th.
Yeah.
But
you had a pretty epic adventure.
Yeah, I did. It was really just a hunt that meant a ton to me, because my brother Ryan and I got a chance to hunt just him and I for the first time since we were kids. And not only was it the first time since and I mean kids like probably 12 and 14. We went on one deer hunt, just him and I, and we killed a deer, or I killed a deer. And that was the last time that him and I had been able to hunt together, just him and I. And it was special because we got to go on, Ryan's an Alaska resident, so we got to go on a sheep hunt. And just a quick backstory on this whole thing, 9 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, something like that, we went on our first sheep hunt. My dad killed the sheep. 3 years later, my brother and I and a buddy of his went on a sheep hunt, and his buddy and I killed a sheep, and Ryan still didn't have a sheep. At the end of that season, or at the end of that hunt, it was just like, we got to come back. Ryan still hasn't got a sheep, and we'd hunted at that point. We had hunted 17 days just for Ryan to try and get a sheep, and I said, man, I'm all in. Like, whatever you got to do, because Ryan is the Alaska resident. Ryan does a lot of the research. Ryan does a lot of the setup in order to make these things happen. And I mean, to be almost completely, to be transparent, I've been riding a lot of his coattails on those hunts and relying heavily on him to plan them and do the research. And because these are all do it yourself. These aren't guided hunts. These are like, do some research, find a place on the map. Ask around, and do some Google Earth stuff, and, pick out some bulls and some places that we want to try and look into, and just put 10 days worth of gear and food on our back and go.
Yeah.
And so I was all about getting Ryan a sheep this year. And so we took off. We went in 2 days prior to the opener, and they dropped us off in the Brooks Mountain Range, and we took off. I mean, when we hit the ground, it was raining, and there was some groups there. There was a group there. There was an outfitter that was absolutely working right out of that strip, and so we found out, like, hey, I hunt this way, and in fact, prior to that, Ryan had found out that this guy was guiding out of this area, and just happened to stumble upon him, and just telling him, hey, we're looking and hunting close to your area, and we just don't want to step on toes. We respect the fact that you're making a living up there, and we don't want to, we don't want to be a burden on you, and we don't want you to be pissed off at us, basically. So they sat down and talked about, this is where I take most of my clients, and in fact, he was really generous in that. He said, since you and your brother are pretty fit, most of the time I can't get clients that would go clear to this spot. So he's like, I'll never reach to this spot, but I've always thought that this would be a good spot to check out, which was way, a long ways away. So we kind of meet up with this guy, and we kind of touch base, and good luck, and we'll see you in a few days. And Ryan and I took off, and we went due east. Basically, we went due east for, I don't know, all day. We landed at 10 o'clock, and we put our packs on, and headed through the tundra and the dry creek bottoms and the raging creeks, and anybody who's ever been to Alaska would know what I'm talking about. When you just feel different when you're in Alaska, man. Everything's so big and so remote and so beautiful, and the area, like, you're just so glad to be there and be alive. And that was us. We just took off walking, and we came across some sheep that we saw probably about an hour into our walk, and we could tell they were bigs and littles, ewes and lambs. But we pulled out the spotter and got some pictures, and we were pretty stoked about it. Headed up, and it rained on us off and on for probably the first 5 or 6 hours, and we had really good gear, so it was nothing but a thing. And heck, I could have been just soaking wet and been happier than anything, because we were in Alaska hunting sheep. Took off, and we really just, I don't know if anybody out there's ever done any Google map research and never seen the area with their eyeballs. It's almost impossible to really understand the difference between looking at a topographical map and putting boots on the ground. And we made that mistake. I know we can get into this bowl up this drainage, and we took up off the drainage, and we're like, oh man, this is not looking good. Like, it looks like it wants to pinch us out and cliff out on both sides. And the creek was wide enough. It was about probably 6 feet across, and there was enough water in it that we had to cross it probably 100 times, but there was some rocks in it, so our feet never really got soaking wet. You get a little splash here and there, but that gives you an idea about how kind of narrow that canyon was, is that you had to walk along the creek and cross the creek and walk and cross the creek and walk and cross the creek. And we got up there, and at about 11 o'clock, we ran out of, there was no place to go. We dropped our camp, and I went up and looked around this one corner, and I was like, man, there's nowhere, we can't go any further than that. We could go up right here, and probably it was about 1,500 feet, probably vertical, to get up and over. And it was a kind of a rock boulders field, and we just kind of regrouped, and when we hunt together, it takes quite a bit to take the wind out of our sails at all. We're just like, well, it is what it is. We're going to camp. We'll go with plan B. Plan B was to back out of there, and we were going to head south. So that's what we did. We sat down, had a good dinner, talked about how awesome it was to be out in Alaska, Alaska and hunting, and woke up the next morning real early, put our camps on our back, and headed out. We started walking south, and we headed south, and we took off, and I bet we walked, I don't know how far we walked. We didn't have like Onyx maps or anything that did tracking. We don't know exactly how far or anything like that, but we did have a GPS, but it was a real old GPS that we didn't pay too much attention about how far things were. We just knew that this is where we wanted to go, and so we took off, and we walked all day. Finally got to a spot where it was a pass where the water changed. One of the water up to this point was flowing north, and then from this point on it flowed south. It was just a kind of a pass where the creek changed, and we camped right there, and we glassed all night long. We glassed and because it wasn't getting dark. It never got dark at this point. You got kind of dusk, but it wasn't getting dark. And so we were up there glassing, and finally, probably like around 11:30, midnight, right in there, Ryan spotted some sheep way out there. You couldn't tell if they were you couldn't see horns through spotter. It was that far away. And we're like, oh shoot, there's some sheep right there. And we were really surprised that we hadn't seen any sheep up to that point, but we were optimistic about,
Now you guys had 12 days set aside?
Yeah, we had 12
cut
days.
Out? Yeah.
We put as many days aside as we could. And so we kind of talked about it that night, like, what's the plan? What do you want to do now? Do you want to go, peek over some ridges, out of the creek bottom, or do you want to basically go after those sheep? Well, those sheep had kind of given us the idea. There was one solo sheep first, and then and a solo sheep is usually a ram. And at this point in the game, if you see a bunch of ewes and lambs, you're in the wrong spot. The big rams are all going to be hanging out by themselves. So, we call it the nursery. If you find the nursery,
Just go somewhere else.
Yep, go further up. Go higher up, because the nurseries are usually down lower, and the big rams are going to be, they're not going to be like way away, but they're not going to be with the ewes and lambs. So just because you see a bunch of bigs and littles, as soon as you see bigs and littles, you can count on that there's probably not going to be that ram you're looking for. So there was one single ram or one single sheep. We're like, that looks promising. And then we saw another one come out, and it wasn't a big and little. It was, they were both the same size. And we're like, okay, those are probably the rams. And we made a decision that the next day we're going to get up, we were going to go after them, because heck, why not? Next day's opening day. Let's go, So we took off and we headed down this super steep pass and ended up, it was probably, I think it was about 4 or 5 miles maybe. Shorter than that as a crow flies, obviously, but walking distance, about 4 or 5 miles. We got there, dropped, went up to this pass where we know we could see where we saw those sheep earlier the day before. And we sat there and the wind was blowing, and we glassed up a bunch of caribou, and there was just a ton of mountain caribou up in that area. And I was just really impressed. Like, man, there's a ton of good caribou in this area, but no sheep.
Now, and you had a tag yourself.
I did. We were going, the whole idea was to get Ryan a sheep, but I was going to pack something. I did end up getting a grizzly bear tag because it was only $25 more. And so I said, I'm going to get a grizzly bear tag. So in case, if we have a problem bear, I'll kill a grizzly bear. My mission was, and what I wanted preferably was to get a sheep. But if I had a grizzly bear tag in my pocket, then I could kill a grizzly bear and tag it. So, and in Alaska, you can if you have a grizzly bear tag, you can kill a sheep, you can kill a caribou, and tag it with that grizzly bear tag. So it's anything less. So, and I also had my bow only. I just went bow only. Ryan had rifle, and my idea was, I've got a sheep, I want to get one with my bow, and that's just the way that's the way it is. So. It wasn't that I was like bow or nothing. It was like, I'd really like to get one with my bow. And so I'm carrying my bow. Ryan's got the rifle, and we're waiting for these sheep to come out. They don't that night, so we sleep on it. And we're like, well, we got to go up and over that pass and take a peek into the other on the backside here. So the next day we make the endless trek. It was unbelievable how it was really the endless hill, because we had to drop off the hill we were on, and it went clear down on the bottom across the creek, and then we started to climb up. And I bet it took us rubbing up against 3 hours to get to the top, to the pass on that bare hill. And it's bare, right? So that's the other thing. That's the thing about hunting those bare hillsides, is you look over there and you're like, you can see the top. It's big. And it's obvious how big, it looks big from where you're at, but until you get over there, you don't realize how big it actually is, or how far it is away, because you're like, oh, that's big. But then it takes you, an hour and a half to get to a place that looks 600 yards away, but it's really about a mile and a half away. Anyway, so we get up to the top, and we're looking for sheep, and man, we didn't see anything, Ryan. I mean, not a thing. We hunted hard. We covered a lot of country that day and looked into a lot of bulls and a lot of craggy, good sheep country. I mean, good craggy rocks with these grassy chutes. And man, we were just like kind of scratching our heads like, man, there's lots of feed in here because there's caribou, but there's not a sheep to be found. So we stuck it out for that day and headed back down to camp, and we just kind of like, what are we going to do now? And we said, oh, let's stick it out, or let's head back, because there's probably some country. We'll look over some different country on the way out, but I really want to check out the north, on the opposite side. So we decided we're going to head back where we camped the night before, camp there, and then head out all the way out and try and get north the next day. Well, we got to, at this point, that was opening day. We didn't see a sheep. Okay, well, we don't want to wait till the last second here. Let's, we're already getting a little like itchy. Like, man, we're starting to feel the angst of like, this isn't going to last forever. Like, let's get on some sheep. And we're getting pretty itchy about wanting to get on some sheep. And so we take off, and we get to the point where we camped the day before. And it's probably, I'm not sure exactly what time it was, 3, 4 o'clock, I guess. And we're like, let's just keep going. So we walked all the way out. What took us 2 days to hike, we hiked all the way out, and then we kept going that day. And we got probably 2 miles from where we ended up camping, and it started raining, and it rained hard, and then it got cold. And then we were like, man, how long is it going to rain at this point? We set up our tent, and at that point, it was probably close to midnight. And it was the first and only time in that trip that we were so tired, and we were so hungry, and so tired of walking in our 80-pound packs all over creation, and kind of like, man, all we're doing is walking. We need to just pick a spot and hunt. And we were frustrated because we hadn't seen any rams at that point. We just seen the one group of ewes, and then the 2 from way out there. And it was the one time that it was like we were having a tough time finding a place to set up. There was water. It was water everywhere. There was no flat spot. We're trying to find a place to pitch the tent just so we can get some food and some rest. And it was the first time that was like, well, where do you think? Where should we look? Man, I don't know. I don't care. Like, let's just put down the tent. Well, we can't just put down the tent. We don't want to be in the water. Well, you pick a spot. And it was like, finally, it was like, Ryan's like, right here's good. And I'm like, fine, let's just set up the tent right here. So we just like set the tent up, and it was pretty short lived. I was like, man, sorry, man. I'm just hungry and tired. I need some sleep and some food. And we got on we had some means of communication, a satellite phone out, and it was getting cold and raining enough, and started to kind of like show signs of snow. And so my brother texted his buddy out of Fairbanks, and he said, no, that's not true. Ryan, he turned the cell phone on and was going to text him, and this message popped up because you could text message on the cell phone, and the text message said, "Hunker down, boys. Weather report says 6 to 8 inches over the next 2 to 3 days." And so we're tired. We just busted our butt for 3 days, feeling like we're kind of chasing our tail, undecisive where we're going to see animals. Are we making the right calls? Like, are we not being patient enough? And then we sit down and we start playing in our minds, and we're thinking, okay, it's going to snow 6 inches. We're going to be not stuck in our tent, but it's going to be miserable weather for the next 3 days. And at that point, we were like, man, this is rough. Like, okay, all right, God, like, we hear you. Like we talked about, man, nothing's ever come easy for us. We've always had to work our tails off for it. We're up for it. Like, we did everything we could to just keep morale high. Like, we're not going to let this get us. It takes one sheep. It takes one moment. And that's how hunting works, right? Like, you can go from beat up and just kind of down to bugle, or see that sheep and just be like, everything switches on a dime.
Turns so fast sometimes.
So we were trying to stay positive. We slept that night, woke up, still just dumping rain. We unzipped the tent, and you couldn't see 10 feet out the tent. It was so foggy, raining hard. We zipped the tent back down and just kind of hung out and, shot the breeze and caught up. Ryan lives in Arizona, and I live in Spokane. We do talk, probably a couple times a week, but it's good just to hang out and sit with my brother.
Sure.
and on the mountain, and just talk life and that kind of stuff. And
this is a pretty small tent. What are you guys running for a tent?
The Hyperlight.
Okay. Is that a 3-man, 4-man for that, or?
No, it's a 2-man.
2-man.
Yeah, and it was plenty.
Tight quarters.
It was plenty. You know what? I take that back. I think it's a 4-man tent. We got a 4-man because we knew that we had the gear, so it's kind of one man is your gear, and then you have 2 guys, and then another gear is another man. And so it was a 4-man Hyperlight, and it was really good. It's made out of that. It's just it's like the toughest, lightest material on the market. I think the tent and the pole combined weighed like 17 ounces. something like that.
Oh, wow.
Super light, super light. Really, I mean, top of the line. Tent, no stretch in the material. Gosh, I wish I could. If my brother was here, he'd be able to tell you right away. But it was a great tent, and so we just hung out in the tent and all day. And I think it was at one point we kind of opened the tent, and the fog was kind of starting. The rain was still there, but the fog kind of started lifting. We could see way up in the hills. We saw three sheep. Put the glass on them, and it was two ewes and a lamb, and the lamb had some gray in it, and that was the first time I'd ever seen any kind of color phase or fanning sheep or anything like that. So that was pretty cool. This little lamb had some gray to it, and quite a bit, noticeably a lot of gray, and so that kind of lifted our spirits a little bit. We're like, okay, well, we know there's sheep in this area. And so the very next day, we spent the whole day in the tent there. The very next day, luckily, the weather was wrong. We didn't get any snow. The next day, the fog was kind of patchy. It was still raining, but we agreed we got to get out of the tent. So we just put on our gear and headed up the mountain, and just headed up and took off. And it was pretty foggy. There were some times we could get some glass across the valley, but it was pretty few and far between. We really just needed to go for a hike, honestly. Like, we just needed to get out of that. We just needed to get out of that tent. And so we did get just around the hill, and the fog was thick enough at points where, if you ever walked in fog, real thick fog at all, you get to that point where you're not sure if you're side hill or uphill or down, like, you're not even sure if you're walking uphill, downhill, or side, like, can't really read the terrain real well. It was about that thick at times, and we just stopped and hang out for a while. And we had the GPS, so we knew that we could just follow the GPS back if it ever got real bad and stayed bad. But we got to a point where fog got super thick, and then it kind of cleared off. Excuse me. It kind of cleared off, and there was 4 bull caribou standing there at 50 yards, just these big, giant caribou just standing there at 50 yards. I pull out my rangefinder and rangefind them. They're 50 yards, and my bow's on my back. And Ryan's like, you want to shoot one of those? And the whole time I'm like, if we shoot one of those, we're going to have to deal with it, and we're going to lose a couple of days of sheep hunting for you. And so I honestly was like, yeah, I'd like to shoot one, but I really would like to give this sheep hunt a little bit more time before we, start having to pack caribou, and that's what it was about. For me, it was really about getting Ryan a sheep. He was like, hey, you want to shoot one of those? But I just kept telling him, that was one of like 2 or 3 times I could have probably stalked and killed a really decent caribou. But
yeah, selfless, man.
Well, he's the one, like I said, he sets all these things up, and he's the only one that has a shot at sheep. It's time for him, and it was all about him the whole time. So we'll fast forward a little bit. It's a 12-day hunt. If I go every day, we're going to be here for way too long. Fast forward to day 9, okay? Let's go to day 8. So day 8, at this point, we had moved our tent up on the hill, found another perch for us to, when we wake up, it's clear out. The clouds have moved out. It's not raining anymore. And we can get right out of our tent, and we can glass a ton of country. And we're just a short walk into this other bowl. So we have a ton of country that we can put glass on for, instantly. Like right out of the tent, or a 5-minute walk. And that was one of the things we had talked about pre-hunt, is that our prior 2 hunts, we felt like we didn't do a good enough job being patient. We would hang out in an area for a little bit, put glass to it for, 2 or 3 hours, and then we would move. And it's like, we need to be more patient. It just takes a second at a ram or for a sheep to come up over a rise or whatever. And if you can see that much country, just sit and be patient. So we moved our tent up, and we're basically just, glassing and looking over area. And about 2 o'clock, we were sitting down having lunch. And, having lunch is, you're not really ever just not paying attention or not behind glass, you're kind of eating and pulling up your binos and checking things out. I spot these 3 sheep, and they're running right to left on, like, way down across the valley on the other mountain range, or the other range over there, and running up. And I put glass on them. As soon as I put glass on them, I could tell the one in the front was a good one. He had some mass to him, and he was a good ram. And I told Ryan, man, there's a good ram over there. We put a spotter on him, and those other 2 were rams as well. But he looked like he carried some mass. He looked pretty good, man. Like, ugh. And we were fired up, man. This is day 8. Okay, this is the first ram that we have seen. Okay, since we hit the ground. Keep in mind we got 4 days left. So we're stoked. We're like, no doubt about it. We're coming off the mountain, and we're gonna go after these sheep. We go off the mountain. We get all the way down to the creek. And we're talking about maybe 1,500 feet, maybe 2,000 feet down off, across the creek, across the tundra flat out there, come up over this rise, put some glass on it, and they're not in this path. They're not bedded down that pass anymore. Well, they probably just. Our guess was they probably just dip just out of sight over this pass. So we go down to this tributary, cross that, and then make the climb up there, and then head up to this pass, and we climb up to pass level, and we're side hilling to just be right at the same level as the pass, maybe a little bit above, so that if they're through the pass, we will be on top of them. And we're creeping over there. Just, man, I know they're going to be right around this hill. We get to a point where it's time to drop pack and like sneak in there, and we did. We snuck around that hill and nothing. It took us like 5 hours, I think, 4 or 5 hours to get to this point from when we decided to go. And it's about 6:30 at night, 7 o'clock at night. Get around here and nothing, and a little bit further, and then it starts to rain, and so we're all zipped up in this rain and on us, and we're sitting there trying to figure out where maybe could they have went, and then all of a sudden, bang, we hear the rocks kicking below us, and it was so steep that you couldn't see 100 yards below you. It was just it fell off, and then out of the bottom, here comes these 3 rams, and they're coming up the other side, and they're pretty close. I instantly know the big one's in the front. I throw my binos up. Ryan's hitting the prone position, getting ready, and he's saying, which one? And I said, definitely the front one. He's the biggest one. And he's looking through his scope, and he's like, is he legal? And I said, yep, because he was running straight away from me. And he had this big flare. I mean, this huge flare straight away, and his horns flared way out, and when he was going straight away, he looked like a big one. I'm like, yeah, Ryan, he's legal. And he turned sideways and kind of swung his head a little bit, and he said, are you sure? And I said, no, I'm not sure. And he said, well, he's looking at it. So he gets out from his rifle, and he gets his binos, and he's looking. And we're looking and looking and looking and looking and waiting for him to turn his head. And he turned his head, and Ryan goes, what do you think? And I said, I think he's legal. I think he's legal. And Ryan's like, I don't think it's complete. I don't think that circle is complete. Anyway, we go on and on like this for probably 5 minutes, and that ram stood there and stood there and stood there. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, just started feeding. He's 150 yards away. And the whole time we're like, he's legal? Yes, no, yes, don't shoot him. Yeah, I think he is. No, he's not. And we decided, okay, let's go back, get the spotting scope, come back, and just risk it. Like, at this point, we can't shoot him. We don't know if he's legal or not. But we definitely need to verify that he's a legal ram. And a legal ram, for those of you out there that aren't really aware of what makes a ram legal, they have to be a full curl ram, which means his horns have to be a complete 360, or he has to be broomed on both sides. So we're running, we're trying to figure out whether this is a legal ram or not. We go back at the spotting scope and we video him. Like, this thing stands there long enough that we're videoing him and then trying to play back the footage and pause it to see if he's legal or not. Long story long enough, we let him walk. We didn't feel good about shooting him. So about 8:00 at night, we had watched him walk over the other side of that knife ridge, and we took off. And we were down a little bit, but we were pretty stoked that it was we actually saw our first ram that was really close, and it got our adrenaline up, and it was kind of fun. So we got back that night about 1:00 in the morning, back to the tent, and we were pretty beat up. Long day. So we slept in the next morning, got up at about 7:00, I guess, probably. And we just hung out up there close to the tent, and we're going to try and stick to the game plan, which is like, we're going to just glass and glass. And it paid off in that we saw a lot more sheep by just sticking to the game plan. And that was just spending time behind glass. And we spent the whole day up there just glassing up sheep. And we found a couple other small rams that were clearly sublegal. We found a couple of nurseries with a lot of ewes and lambs. And as it started to get later in the evening, Ryan and I just kind of had a heart-to-heart. It was day 9. We'd been on one pursuit the night before, and then that day we'd seen some rams, but they're all sublegal. And we just kind of talked about the expectations of a hunt, of any hunt, really, and why we were feeling this angst of, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to get this done. We got to get this tag filled, and the anxiety behind that, the angst behind that, and who are we what is success? I mean, we talked about, like, what is a successful hunt? Who are we afraid of disappointing if we come home empty-handed, and that kind of thing. And we really just decided that, let's head back towards the strip tomorrow. We've spent enough time in this spot. We've seen a lot of area. We've stared at a lot of area. So let's head back towards the strip. And we're going to hunt this range where we saw those ewes and lambs when we first came off the plane. We were going to just hunt up and beyond that. And, it's going to be day 10 the next day. So let's just head back there. We'll get up high. We'll set up base camp. We'll hunt there for a day and a half. And then we'll head for the strip on Saturday, because we're getting picked up on Saturday. So yeah, we woke up on Thursday and felt good about it. We were like, you know what? From here on out, we're gonna shoot something. There was nothing off the table at this point. At this point, we really had been focused on sheep, and we're gonna, like, hey, you know what? A good caribou, a grizzly bear, whatever. We're gonna head towards the strip, and we're gonna get some meat down. And get up. Ryan was up about 4:00. He kind of nudged me and said, hey, let's get an early start so we can get some hunting in today, because we had at least a half a day walk back to there. And he's standing there, eating his breakfast, and I packed everything up and threw it on my back and just about ready to head out and start heading back south, back to the strip. And Ryan's glassing out north, where we've been glassing for 2 days, and says, hey, there's some sheep. And I could see where he was glassing. And we hadn't seen anything over there. I mean, there wasn't any sign of life in that direction. And of course, with the naked eye, you look out there, they're pretty easy to see, the big white dots out there. And I was like, holy cow, those are sheep. And like we've done, a bunch of times, take the pack back off, get the spotting scope out, and put a spotting scope on them. And to the spotting scope, they were a long ways away. You could tell that they were both rams, and one of them was pretty good. And we had just played this movie 2 days before, right? Where we spent all that energy going all the way out there, and he'd been sublegal. And so we looked across, and we're like, that he looks like a good ram from here. And we talked about it for about maybe a half a second, and we were going like, this is what we came here for. Let's not get caught up. And just because we were talking about going back towards the strip in the morning, those are sheep. And that's, even though that's the opposite direction of the strip, that's where we're going, because that's what we came here for. So we put a plan together. We're going to get to this point on this side of the valley. We're going to get some more glass on them and check them again, because we'd probably be in about another, I don't know, half a mile closer. And so we put our packs on, we bailed off, we climbed up to this little pass, this little saddle, and put glass on them again. And at that point, we could see both of them pretty good, and we could verify that one of them was for sure a shooter. It was definitely full curl. It was definitely a legal ram, and that was like all we needed. Like our morale went through the roof, man. We were just like testosterone shots or something, man. We were just like, let's go. Like we just about made a scene just seeing that he was illegal, man. We were just like, oh my gosh. Because if anybody's ever been sheep hunting, I'll tell you, sheep are not hard to kill. They're just hard to find.
Right.
If you can find them, you can usually get on them and kill them. If you're in any kind of shape at all, or if you have any kind of grit about you at all, you can get on them, or you can kill them. But it's just a matter of finding them. So we finally found them, and we're just pumped. We just know, man, we like the chances of us succeeding at this point are 95%. You know, so we take off. We get off of that. We get down the creek, and we dump all our gear. We just said we're going to pile our gear in a pile. We're going to cover it with some of the extra, like an extra coat that we have, and Ryan had like he had a little extra tarp, and we just covered it because it was raining, of course. And we just took off, and we're going to get to this one rise and then get another look at them. So we took off across this flat, and we were just about ready to start making this climb up to this little pass where we could get another look at them. And I'm like, what in the world? And we'd seen so many caribou at that point that I was like, oh, is that a caribou? No, that's not a caribou. And it was a giant grizzly bear. It was a really big, mature grizzly bear. And he was about 300 yards away or whatever. And he was right between us and where we wanted to go. So we sat there, and I was like, how long would it take us to, because at this point we had one ram that we knew was a good enough ram to shoot, and that was it. So I asked Ryan, how long would it take us to deal with the grizzly bear? What I was hoping he would say was, oh, it wouldn't take very long at all with both of us. And he goes, man, you're talking about 4 hours. And I'm like, yeah, I've never shot a bear. So I don't know how long. I can assume it wouldn't take too long to rug them out, but I don't know the whole process. I've never done it. I think Ryan had done it a couple of times, and he's like, it's a pretty big deal. It's not something, it's not like just, quartering out an elk or something. It takes a little bit. So I said, well, forget that. Let's go around him. I'll shoot him if he becomes a problem, but I don't want to shoot him because we got a ram to shoot. We went around this bear, got up to our point, and that bear kind of just left us alone and just kept wandering a little bit down to the right. We kept our eye on him a little bit to make sure he was just kind of minding his own business. We won't mind ours. And we peeked over this spot, and we found these sheep. They had kind of wandered off this pass and down into this real craggy stuff, and we're perched on right at the bottom of this draw where these two draws had come together. There was a real deep cliffy draw where a lot of water was coming through, and then there was another really deep cut draw where at the bottom of that draw there was about a 15-20 foot cliff, and they were perched right above that waterfall it was really pretty. Just these two perches up there and stuck out like sore thumbs, white critters out there on the gray rocks. And so we range them. They're 900 and some yards away, and that's just too far for us to shoot. Like, we're not comfortable. I know some guys are out there, they're comfortable shooting that far, and Ryan's like, we need to get closer. I'm not going to shoot 900 yards. So we ranged another point between between the sheep and us, and we put another plan together and thought, if we can get to this point without them seeing us, that'll be a 350 yard shot. and I can make that shot all day. Okay, so we came down off the perch, went down and around, came through the pass, and about an hour later, we were pretty close to the point that Ryan had put a range to. And he looked kind of over the rock and looked back at me, and then stood on top of the rock and then waved me up. And that's never a good sign. I went up there and I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I can see where they were and they're not there. And so we just started scanning, like, okay, where are they? Where are they going to come out? We knew we knew that they didn't get down and walk back to where they came from, because we would have saw them. I climbed the hill super high because I thought maybe they just dropped off the other side of their perch. So I climbed the hill that we were on as high as I had to in order to see behind the perch. They weren't there. I looked up the real steep, cliffy drainage, and it was so craggy. Like, if they would have snuck out that way, they would probably still be making their way out that way. And I just didn't think that they'd be able to get out that way without. I just don't think they would go that way, especially when up the other draw there was these grassy chutes. And so, well, if they didn't go this way and they didn't come back from where they came from, they must have went up and over they must have went up and over the draw they're in. And that draw that they were perched at the bottom of kind of went up and then kind of swept to the left. And from where we were sitting, we felt like we could see about 95% of both sides of that draw. And so it didn't really even dawn on us that we could definitely see the whole right side of that draw. But the left side of that draw, we felt like we could see about 95% of that. And we sat there long enough that we thought, if they're walking in that one corner of the draw that we can't see, we'd have saw them by now. They'd have walked out of there and we'd have seen them. So we were like, well, they didn't vanish. Let's just go walk around this mountain and see if they walked over the top. So we took off, went down, got another look at the grizzly bear, and walked by him again. And he was dead asleep, facing the dirt, just spread eagle on his belly, sleeping. It was pretty cool to see. And we just kept walking, got around there, and got into the shale rock and started side hilling, and it got pretty gnarly. We got to a point where it was like maybe a little bit too unsafe, and we try not to push it too much. We don't want to like get ourselves in a bad spot and get hurt. I mean, we know where we are. We have no doubt that there's no question that we don't want to get in any kind of situation where we can't get ourselves out or get in trouble. So we got to a point where it's like, I think we're done. I don't think we can get around this thing anymore without being, stupid. And Ryan says, if we just go back here a little bit, I think we can get to that rock. And I was like, yeah, all right. I mean, it was steep enough, Ryan, that I was walking up, stopping, and then turning around and letting Ryan walk up behind me, because if we were kicking rocks down, I wanted him seeing the rocks coming. So we just kind of leapfrogged the whole way up, and then side hill. Once we got on the side hill, obviously we're kicking our rocks down into the draw. Mm-hmm. And anyway, we get to the point, and we finally get to a point where we're pretty close to the top, and we can see that whole canyon, and it's pretty apparent that those sheep did not come over. It was a knife edge that pass that they would have went up and over. It was cliffed out on the other side, or super steep on the other side, and it wasn't like it was plush grass or anything on that side where they were going over there to feed. So at that point we were like, man, I don't know where they went, but they didn't walk over the other side. I'm not sure where they went, but let's get off of here. So we were going to get to the top, and we were just going to dive over the other side into those grassy chutes and walk the grassy chute down into the draw, and then walk back out and just head for the strip. Well, we got to the top, and Ryan peeks over and says, "Yep, this is it, man. Like this, right down there is where they were perched, and that I know we can get down this grassy chute." And I was like, "Yeah, we can definitely get down this grassy chute." And I just happened to look up the draw to the right, and I could see there was one spot where I couldn't see. And I was like, man, while we're up here, let's just walk this knife edge as far as we can and keep looking, look back where we can't see. So we moved up probably 100 yards maybe, just kind of like skirted around these castle-like structures at the top of this knife edge, where it's just like you're kind of dodging around them and get to the other side so you can peek over again. And I was in the lead, and I got to the next opening where you could peek over before Ryan did. And I got there and I turned around to watch him walk to make sure he was all right. And once he was pretty close to me, I just stepped over and looked over the edge, and here were these sheep, and they were just perched perfectly. They were below us, and one was down and to the right, and one was broadside down and up on the left. And I turned around and Ryan saw it in my face. He's like, no way. And I'm like, they're right there, man. And I pulled out my rangefinder and rangefind them, and they were 485 yards. And Ryan's like, man, that is a long shot. And I said, well, I think we can get closer. So we just went up the knife edge a little bit and peeked over the other side and rangefind. I was like, how about 435 yards? And he's like, that's still a shot. And I was like, dude, you can make that shot all day long. And so Ryan got ready. I'll shorten the story a little bit because we sat there for about an hour and a half waiting for that sheep to stand up, and it was all about Ryan. Like, Ryan, here's the sheep you want. We got to watch him for an hour and a half, and he wanted to wait till they stood up, so we did. And when they stood up, I heard Ryan click the safety, and I just had the binos up, and boom, and you could tell he was hit hard, and he was just standing there, and Ryan's like, man, should I shoot him again? And I'm like, man, he is wobbling back and forth, and then he goes down. Well, as soon as he goes down, Ryan jumps up from behind the gun. I jump into the gun because at this point we had got really good look at both of the sheep, and they were both full curl, past full curl rams. I jumped behind the gun. The other sheep had stood up and was looking back at the sheep that Ryan had just shot, that had at this point rolled down the hill, rolled all the way down the hill to the bottom of the creek. And I'm in the gun, and he's looking down into his left, and so his left horn is covering his vitals, and I'm just waiting for him to turn his head and get out of the way before I shoot. Turns his head, looks up the hill, boom, I let him have it, smack him right behind the shoulder. And he goes up the hill just a little bit, but I could tell he was hit hard. You know how they hump up, and his left leg went stiff, and he kind of went up the hill a little bit, and then tipped over backwards. And I still can see that so clearly in my head. I can so clearly see that vision of him tipping over backwards, sliding down the hill and stopping. And Ryan and I looked at each other and we're just like, we did it, man. Like, we just doubled. We just doubled. Of course, I turned into a sailor. I couldn't stop swearing, right? And how we just effing doubled, and like we're going crazy. And my brother was speechless. So he's like, and so we're playing this footage back later, and it was pretty funny.
I've seen the footage. It's you're not a big swearing guy either.
Yeah,
I don't hear you swear a lot, but there's a lot of F-bombs in that.
I couldn't, it was almost like I didn't know what else to say other than, we just effing doubled. We just effing doubled. Like, I was like a broken record on a sailor track, and Ryan just was like, he looked like it. Yeah, I don't know. He said, the way he put it, he said, I don't know if it's actually a PC, but he's like, but let's just say he was like, man, I sound like an idiot. He's like, I sound like I can't say anything. Like, I forgot how to talk like an idiot, and all you can say is the F word. He's like, boy, this is going to make some really good footage. But aside from all that, you guys, I mean, like, it was an epic moment. It was a cherished moment. You guys probably have some of these stories yourself, but it was like a very special moment for my brother and I.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you guys, that was what, day 9 of your 10-day
That was day 10 of 12.
Day 10 of 12. And how many days did Ryan put into that sheep altogether from the previous?
The first hunt, we hunted for him for 8 days. Second hunt, we hunted for him for 9 days. So that's 17. And then that day, that was day 10. So that was day 27.
27.
That we had hunted
in the mountains looking for that
almost
sheep.
a month.
Hunted for sheep specifically for Ryan.
Yeah.
Ryan, you're up. He was up for 27 days.
Wow.
And he finally.
No doubt he was speechless at that point.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
And it was funny. My brother, like I get a little choked up thinking about what he said. I said, "What do you think, brother?" And once he stopped crying, the only thing he could say was, "I don't deserve this."
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah,
Man.
Yeah.
After 27 days.
Yeah.
He still felt on.
It was that special of a moment.
Yeah. Like it was like you could see it in his face. Like, what did I do to deserve this? It was definitely a really amazing moment. I'm glad I caught it on camera.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that that it was pretty special. And it was special to both of us, and it was definitely one of those moments where I felt God's presence. It was divine intervention, man, because he put us through the ringer. He could read. It was like we talked about it. God can read your heart. He knows you want it tough, but you want it tough. I'm gonna give you tough, but not what you think, not your tough. I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna nudge you beyond what you have in mind for tough, and he did. And then just when we were really broke down. Bang. All right.
Yeah.
It's the parents saying, just this controlled environment. Like, okay, you're good. Now go get them.
Yeah. And there was almost like all these little pieces that could have thrown you guys off the path that you first originally set out for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got a grizzly bear in there. You've got a grizzly tag.
Yeah.
You've got, some really good quality caribou that are pretty enticing at 50 yards.
Yep.
And you just kept on the course.
Yep. We had the one sheep that, we had the itchy trigger finger. We could have. I mean, come to find out, we had a picture of it. And we asked the wildlife biologist when we checked in our sheep. We showed him the picture, and he said, "Yeah, that's legal. That's legal." He goes, "He's barely legal, but he's legal."
Yeah.
But we didn't shoot him. We didn't shoot that sheep. So there was a lot of things that could have deterred us.
Mm-hmm.
So needless to say, we're pumped, and we can't wait to get our hands on it. Right. So we dive off of here, and we get down on the bottom. We're going up this, and as soon as we hit the bottom of this draw, my eyes were opened to, okay, this is rough. Like, we were having a tough time just getting to our rams because it wasn't just a creek running out of this draw. It was there was parts where there was like these cliff steps in the bottom, so we had to kind of find a way around these cliff steps, and we finally got our way around up to the sheep without really feeling like there was much danger. It wouldn't have been big falls, maybe 5 feet. We just had to like kind of maneuver over and step up and get up to it. Got up to Ryan's sheep and had that moment and where he just didn't feel like, man, I don't deserve this, and we were super just pumped that, man, I can't believe what God's provided for us and this experience, and so glad to be with each other. Got up to my sheep, which was a bit more of a challenge because he died up on the perch, so we had to really be careful getting up there, and we actually contemplated kicking him down. Do we want to deal with him up here, because that means we're gonna have to bring the meat down. And is that safe? We kind of kicked it around, and we just didn't want to risk kicking him off because he might hang up, in a spot we wouldn't maybe not be able to get to, might chip and break horn, or we didn't know. We knew that we could deal with him right there, and then on the way out, I would just put him in my pack, and I would just back down this steep. There wasn't any fall risk. Like, I wasn't going to fall off a cliff or anything, but it was just really steep. And I just didn't, if you went maybe feet first, there was maybe a threat of like just losing control and sliding down. And I just put the sheep in my pack and just back down, just kind of crawled backwards all the way back down until I hit the bottom. And then we broke down Ryan's and got his all packed up. And we got it all packed up about 8 o'clock. And I remember, I'll never forget the first time Ryan had put his pack on. Ryan's sheep was a little bit bigger than mine. So it outweighed mine, and he had a rifle. I didn't have my bow at that point. And I'll never forget Ryan's face the first time he stood up. He stood up, and he was like, looked at me like, we're supposed to pack. I mean, we're going to pack this thing that far. And I was like, and he's like, man, are we going to have to make 2 packs? And I was like, because it crossed my mind, do we have time for 2 packs is what crossed.
Sure.
I don't think we have time. And it's 8 o'clock on Thursday. We get picked up at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And at this point, we're about 13 miles from the airstrip. And
Holy smokes.
yeah. And I said, I don't think we have time. And we started out there, and we knew that once we got out on that flat, that the last time we had seen that grizzly, he was right there. And we were going to walk basically right down the creek that grizzly was laying right next to, because it was by far the easiest way to get out to where we had dropped camp, by far. I mean, if we tried to dodge that bear, we would have to climb probably 1,500 feet to get up and over a perch and then down. We're just going to get out of here, take the gun off, and we'll just deal with it, and probably a stupid move, but I mean, we really didn't know. We didn't know what else to do. We got to go that way. We know there's a bear there, but what are we going to do? We're not going to walk an extra 3 miles and up, 1,500 feet with 160, 170, 150, 160 pound packs just because there might be a bear in this area.
Right.
We'll just keep our eyes open, keep our ears on and eyes on, and if we see him, we're going to drop packs and we're going to run our butts off as fast as we can to get away from him. Once he chews on our packs, we'll start letting him have it. But
Right.
Anyway, so the first challenge number 1 was getting down. So we're walking this dry creek bed down out of there, and about 3/4 of the way down there, it dawned on me that that's right, there's a 15-foot waterfall on the end of this. And I was like, Ryan, I'm pretty sure there's a waterfall at the end of this draw, because we started running into water, and then it started flowing a little bit faster. And I was like, Ryan, you know what? There's a waterfall here. And we got to a point, and I looked down because we were probably only maybe 100 yards from where it comes out. And I looked down this big cliff, and I looked, and it was smooth, like a water slide. It was just like pristine smooth.
Dished out.
Yep. And it was all the way down. You can see where it just disappeared. And I said, there's a waterfall right there. And so, okay, well, let's pick our way up here. We picked up, there was a little bit of a walk just above the bottom, and we kind of picked our way around and got to a spot and looked down, and we're like, man, it's cliffed out. What are we going to do? So we sat there and, all right, well, maybe we should just take our packs off and throw them off.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can, pick our way down. Because it's dangerous. I mean, at that point, if we didn't want to rock climb back down, but we knew we could find someplace where we might be able to squeeze down, but we didn't want to do it with big, heavy packs. So we're like, well, maybe we just throw our packs down, but we don't want to break the pack. And it's going to land in the water. And we're just like, man, what are we going to do? So we said, well, we're just going to have to walk up the draw. And I remember being up on the top and looking up where we were going to go. And I remember all I remember is seeing cliffs the whole way up, man, at a site around the corner here. I said, this might be rough. We might, but we were trying to stay positive. And we went 30 yards, and there was our chute. And we got, I was like, oh my gosh, we can get down here. And we back down and hit the bottom. It wasn't even really that gnarly or anything. We hit the bottom of the creek and looked up, and it was cliff the entire way, except for that one little sliver.
Wow.
We had one sliver, and we just happened to it was right off of that waterfall,
Right.
and we hit the bottom, walked out, and that creek bottom took us out right to where the bear was, and then that dumped into the valley where the marsh was, or where the tundra was. So we just took off, and we were pretty stoked about getting out of there. First of all,
No boost energy.
and we're like, yeah, we're
Not
we're
having to
out.
go back.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, we're good. We got, and at that point, at that point, your packs are starting to feel normal. All right, it's normal, and it's heavy, but it's like
Doable.
It's doable. It's not the shock. You don't have the shock of, oh my gosh, that's a heavy pack. It's like, we can do it. Started walking out. Ryan takes the gun off, and it starts getting dark. And we're like, man, is it getting dark? And Ryan's like, yeah, it's getting pretty dark here. And just got around the corner and pulling up glass, and you could see pretty good in the glass. No bear. Keep walking, and all I was thinking about was, I hope that bear didn't dump into the creek and is hiding in the brush, because the only brush in the whole country is right next to the creek, and it's super tall. And I'm like, as long as he's not in that brush, we'll be all right. So we just headed out, and hey bear, hey bear, hey bear, and we're just making noise and keeping our eyes peeled, and we finally get through that and out, and we never felt like we were like, okay, we're safe, because that bear is back there, and we walked by him. We never saw him. We didn't know where he went. He could be out in front of us still, but we did know that we were about 2 miles. At that point, we were about 2 miles from our gear, GPSed, and it was tundra walking, which it's not fun walking. It wasn't gonna be very fun to walk across this tundra, but we were close to our gear. And at that point, it was about, I don't know, maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock. But no, it was about 11 o'clock, because it was starting to get dark. And we were trying to figure out, okay, so what's the plan? What are we going to do? Like, are we going to go back to our gear, eat, set up tent? Like, there's no place to set a tent up right there, Ryan. Like, he's like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, who's going to sleep and who's going to watch for the bear? Because there's a bear right here. Like, the same flat that we're thinking about setting tent is the same. That bear's in this flat somewhere. And then I made the suggestion, why don't we get to our gear, throw what we need in there, our sleeping bags, and then head for the strip. Let's just go straight to the strip. So we got in the back, flopped our packs off. It was about, at that point, about 11:30, midnight. Ate some food, and then put our packs on and headed. We walked we were pretty determined to try and make it all the way out of there, and it got completely dark. Needed headlamps. It was pitch dark. Rain, and it was raining. It rained on us from the time that we shot. Got our packs on after we killed them to the time we got out. It rained on us. So about 5 o'clock in the morning, we finally decided, man, we needed some rest. Unloaded, got some sleep, made it back to the strip, turned around, and we made it to the strip at about 2 o'clock on Saturday. 2 o'clock on Friday. 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. Set up the meat cache off the ground, set up the tent so that it didn't get rained on, no sun on it, and the sun came out. We had empty packs and headed back. We had to go back to get our gear now. So then we headed back for our gear, got our gear, turned around, came back, and made it back to the strip at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and crawled in the tent. Got picked up on Sunday.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock on Sunday. That's kind of long-winded, but it's tough to leave any of that stuff out.
Yeah, it's a good story. It's cool because it's a long story, but it really kind of shows everything throughout a sheep hunt, which is probably what most guys are going to deal with. You know, all the little trials and, a lot of days spent in the mountains. So anybody, I think, who's thinking about a sheep hunt like that, I know I wanted to hear it because someday I hope to do a big sheep hunt like that.
Yeah.
It really gives a good description of what to expect. So yeah, I'm glad you told it.
Yeah.
That's quite an accomplishment for sure.